that happens. That so say your child's was in this school, is going to go to this elementary school, is now being shifted to this elementary school to balance out the population within the town. So all of those type of changes that have to happen really have to be communicated, and that's really, I think it's really difficult when there's no one in our school system, and like many others, that's really directed. It's not someone's one job to deal with the community and be a community relations person.
Yeah, I think that everything that's been said is so true. I mentioned that I lived in Shaker Heights, Ohio, for 9 years, and the motto of that community was, and it was posted everywhere. In fact, as I recall, it was even on the public trash receptacles, and it was, a community is known by the quality of the schools it keeps. That's the message. That's the message that I try to convey to my community, and to some extent we've had some success with that, and we do tend to attract families to our community who are moving into Rhode Island and looking for good quality public education. I remember when I moved, when I was looking at real estate, I looked in Providence, and the first thing that any of my professional peers asked about when they heard that I was looking in Providence was, well, what private school are you going to send your kids to? There was absolutely no faith in the public school system in Providence, and it was a given that either you lived in a suburban community, or if you lived in Providence, you'd send your kids to private school. I think that it really requires the engagement to whatever extent possible. And now it's especially difficult and challenging because the fiscal situation in many communities, and it is a critical situation in some communities in Rhode Island, where they really are challenged to try to properly support public education. And in fact, I can tell you that one of the things that happens is that public education seems to drop on the priority list in difficult fiscal times, and you start making sacrifices at the cost of our children's well-being because of fiscal issues. So I think that there's a lot of things that can be done, but it is absolutely right that this is a grassroots process, and you have to get into the minds of everyone to be an advocate for public education, for it to work well, because so much of it derives from the message that is communicated in the home.
These are all common themes. There is one thing, though, that I will, kind of a Niagara Falls type of a question for me. It's the charter school privatization issue regarding the direct attack, in essence, on confidence in the public school system around the country and specifically in the urban areas. In Massachusetts, if you open a charter school, there's a formula, and over a 4-year period, there is some revenue sharing, but at a certain point, basically the per capita cost of the children in the charter school end up being paid for by the public school budget, which means that they're building their own facilities, spending their own capital money, and you are, in essence, subsidizing the charter school system. That formula has to be changed. I've been heavily involved in that for the last 6 years, for accountability for charter schools, not only from the standpoint of the spending, but also from the standpoint of some of the practices in which not all kids had an opportunity to attend the charter school, whether either by selection or after they're there. First sight of a special ed issue or disciplinary issue, or not doing the work at the level that they hoped, those kids come back to the public school system, and it's something that is obviously not appropriate. The other thing is that let's be honest. All of us want the best education. If there's a separate funding item for charter schools, we're all for it. And you may get blowback from the unions, but the fact is it's in the proof of the pudding. And if you can set up a system that's equitable, I certainly support it. Our experience in New Bedford is that the charter schools haven't produced any more in the way of educational attainment than the public schools have. And our per capita in New Bedford is about $8,000 for an individual child in the public schools and about $10,500 in the charter school. So it seems to me I want $10,500 for each kid in the public school then, and let's again see how it all works out. The other thing I want to say, though, that I think is extremely important is that we hear about education reform, and I'm going to say something now that don't take out of context, but from my perspective, education reform as we know it since the 1993 reform in Massachusetts, or No Child Left Behind, is dead. It's dead because it needs to be completely rethought and work towards the goal of providing an education for all of our kids, not just the ones that we know would have gotten the education anyhow. And you start out at any given time with a certain number of kids that you could just throw out of the nest immediately and they'll fly. And then there are an awful lot of kids that you need to fly with them, and if you don't have the ability to do it, you don't have the resources to do it, it will not work. The last thing that I want to say regarding this thread is that chart for me and with me over the next, for the last decade and over the next decade, this argument that goes, if the reason that our schools are so important, but the reason that we know they're failing is because we're not doing well in the global economy. And I want to tell you, anytime someone says global economy and education, what they've done is put together a ball of rhetoric that is only a very, very harmful discussion for public school systems in our society. Because as a mayor, as an attorney, and as a mayor, I've spent an awful lot of time dealing with the issue of the global economy and how the U.S. competes. And I'll tell you a very quick example of this. Mr. Driscoll, who was head of department or the commissioner of the Department of Education back when I first became mayor, explained to me why the MCAS system and why attracting the schools was so important, because we need to compete in the global economy. And I said to Mr. Driscoll at the time that the way you compete in the global economy is that you eliminate the EPA, you eliminate the Department of Labor, you eliminate all types of working conditions and benefits, and you drop the minimum wage down to about $1.10, and you'll compete in the global economy pretty darn well. But other than that, the fact is that most of the patents, most of the R&D, most of the technology that's coming around the world is still coming out of the United States of America. And the sad thing is that most of the facilities around the world that are being built to allegedly compete with us in the global economy are being paid for by US dollars. So the idea that we mix global economy and somehow we've fallen behind with public education is something that is a very, very dangerous argument, because we can't win the price point on the global economy right now unless every other country begins to insist on human conditions being improved for their own people. So, and I find when I'm in a meeting on charter school, all of a sudden someone gets up, whether it's a parent or whether it's a proponent, and says, yes, but you must understand we're having a problem in the global economy. And that's when you sit down and you say, we really need to take the hood up here and take this engine apart piece by piece and look at it. Don't confuse these issues. Education quality, charter schools, innovative schools, new initiatives, each one has to be boiled down and looked at, because the unintended consequences, the rhetoric around each, is something that is not going to resolve the problem. It's just going to continue to divide the people who have identified the problem.
And now, if you guys have questions, please let us know.
First of all, I think it's been a terrific panel, and I thank you all for coming. I kind of wish you were here yesterday, though, because we talked a little bit more about the content associated with education reform, and I wanted to sort of segue into superintendents for a minute. What I've been told by actually my husband, who was one of the panelists yesterday, that in a lot of interviews he's done with school superintendents and board members around the country, that a lot of them say that the secret to success is longevity, in a word. That one of the best things you can do is hire a superintendent who is going with the program and stays a long time, because that's how change gets established and becomes tradition, I guess. I know a little bit about Montgomery County. There's a superintendent who's been there for a long time, he recently left, I think, but had tremendous longevity and tremendous success. And I'm wondering if you can all talk a little bit about how to choose a superintendent who will fulfill that kind of mandate.
Well, first, I want to say about Montgomery County is that everyone who's involved at a board level in public education is pretty much aware of Montgomery County because they have been, in effect, a model for many other districts around the country. Not to say that Shirley will be the first to confess to you that they have their issues, but they have done a great job. In response to your question, I just went through a superintendent search process. We in Darrington, Rhode Island had a superintendent for 14 years, had a great relationship and great rapport with the faculty, and it worked very, very well. It was a sad day when he retired. After that, we hired a then retired superintendent from a district in Massachusetts who stayed for 5 years and is now leaving. And you can see the difference. Longevity is an attribute, particularly if you have that good morale and good relationship with the faculty, which I think is so critically important because then there's a lot of credibility running in both directions. I would say that when you're looking for a superintendent, you need to be very honest with yourself about what your district is and what it's looking for and what its demands are. We're a relatively high-performing district where I am now, and so the superintendent wouldn't have survived very long if that superintendent, he or she, did not articulate strong views about how best to, in fact, improve what we're already doing in the way of student achievement. And I know that that person has to be aware of and articulate well what is the current thinking on best practices. And when I say best practices, those that are most likely to result in improved student achievement. And that requires now some additional challenges because I don't know if you talked about the Common Core of Learning over the last couple of days here, but that is on the agenda right now of every single school district in the country with the exception of those in 4 states, Virginia, Texas, Alaska, and I believe Nebraska. And that means that we now are going to have common standards in English language arts in Massachusetts and all those other 46 states, plus the District of Columbia. And so every school district in the country will be struggling in order to develop their own curriculum plans that align with those standards. The standards are coming out, not the curriculum. So a superintendent is going to have to be very much on that subject and be prepared to go into a strategic planning effort, if not already started, very soon, in order to address those issues. But yes, and I agree that there's that, and also the awareness of fiscal limitations and the creativity and how to address and respond to those, because we're all looking at flat funding in many, many districts in the country.
I'll just add one thing about that. I am from Washington, D.C., where we have gone through, I think, 3 superintendents in 5 years, and continuity and longevity is critical. People who aren't familiar with D.C.'s public education, let's just say it's not fantastic. I mentioned the charter issue because that's happening right now, and it's hard to negotiate these issues when you don't have somebody in there for the long haul, or who is familiar with DC politics and DC public education systems. So